It was a Thursday morning in late October, the kind of morning that tricks you, where the sunlight pouring in through the kitchen window makes everything look warm, almost golden, but the moment you step outside, the air snaps at you like winter's early warning. The kitchen smelled faintly of fresh coffee and toast, with a hint of cinnamon from the candle my wife had lit the night before. The refrigerator hummed softly, and every now and then the baseboard heater clicked, announcing it was doing its job against the creeping cold. I was at the table, sitting in my usual spot, laptop open, glasses sliding down my nose, half reading an email while also pretending to glance at the meeting agenda for later that day. My phone was face up beside me, buzzing every few minutes with reminders and little urgent messages from work. Urgent to them, maybe. To me, they were just more proof that the day had already gotten away from me before it had even started. Across from me sat Emily, my little girl, 8 years old. She was perched on her chair like it was a throne that didn't quite fit her, her legs swinging lazily because they didn't reach the floor yet. The sunlight caught the strands of her hair, turning them into tiny ribbons of gold. In front of her sat a half-eaten bowl of cereal. The milk had already done its work, softening the flakes into a sad little pile, but she didn't seem to care. Her attention was fixed on the sheet of paper in front of her. She was leaning forward, elbows on the table, one hand holding the paper steady, while the other worked a purple crayon across the page in fast, confident strokes. I could hear the faint sound of wax on paper. It was oddly rhythmic, almost meditative. Every now and then, she would pause, tilt her head, and then go back to coloring. I watched for a moment, and then, in the way parents sometimes do, I slipped back into my own world, eyes on the screen, fingers tapping away. Minutes passed. The only sounds were the crayon, the hum of the fridge, and the occasional sip of my coffee. Finally, I asked, "Hey kiddo, what are you drawing over there?" My voice was casual, half distracted, the kind of question you ask because you feel like you should, not because you're ready to actually hear the answer. She didn't look up right away. She just kept coloring, then switched to a yellow crayon filled in a corner, and only then did she lift her head. She turned the paper around so I could see. It was a drawing of our family, 3 figures side by side, smiling under a bright blue sky. Her mom was on the left, tall, hair flowing, wearing a dress. Emily was in the middle, taller than her mom, beaming with a crown of yellow rays around her head. And me, I was on the far right, tiny, so small. I'd been alive long enough to know that not all hard truths come from adults. But hearing that from my own daughter, that was different. The words didn't come at me like an accusation. They came like a statement of fact. She wasn't angry. She wasn't whining. She was just telling me how things looked from where she sat. And it stung. Not because she was wrong, but because she was right. In that moment, I wanted to defend myself. I wanted to say, "Emily, you don't understand. I'm doing this for you. I work hard so you can have the things you need. A good home, good food, opportunities." But even as I thought it, I knew it wouldn't mean a thing to her. Because to an 8-year-old, love isn't measured in mortgage payments or grocery bills. It's measured in the time you're willing to give them, even when you're tired, even when you're busy. Her bowl of cereal sat untouched as she went back to coloring, as if she hadn't just ripped open a part of me I didn't even know was fragile. I sat there, staring at my laptop screen, but none of the words in front of me made sense anymore. All I could see was that drawing, me, small, almost an afterthought in my own child's world. The air outside was sharp and clean when we stepped out of the house, the kind that nips at your cheeks, but wakes you up in a way coffee can't. The sky was pale blue, washed out in the early light, and the ground was littered with a scatter of orange and red leaves that crunched under our shoes. Emily walked a few steps ahead of me toward the car, her backpack bouncing slightly with each step. She didn't skip like she sometimes did. No humming, no little bursts of chatter about her latest art project or what her friend Mia had told her the day before. Just Quiet. I unlocked the car, and she climbed into the back seat without a word. I started the engine, and the dashboard lights blinked to life. A thin layer of frost was still clinging to the edges of the windshield, slowly melting in uneven patches. We pulled out of the driveway. Normally, Emily would start talking before we even reached the end of the street, about a funny dream she had, a new song she'd learned at school, a silly thing our cat did. But today, she just looked out the window, her small hands resting in her lap. I glanced at her through the rearview mirror. She wasn't frowning, she wasn't pouting, but there was a distance in her gaze, like she was watching something far away, the kind of look kids get when they're thinking about more than they're saying. The radio was playing softly, a local morning show, with cheerful hosts bantering about weekend plans, but even that felt out of place. I reached over and turned the volume down until the only sounds were the hum of the engine and the faint rustle of her jacket as she shifted in her seat. We stopped at a red light. I thought about saying something light, something to break the silence, maybe a joke about the silly squirrel running along the telephone wire outside, but the words caught in my throat because deep down I knew this silence wasn't just about that morning. It was about all the mornings before it, all the evenings when I'd said, "Just give me a minute, sweetheart. I'm finishing something important." And that minute had stretched into an hour. I kept one hand on the steering wheel and the other resting on the gear shift, my thumb tapping lightly against it. My mind replayed her words. "That's how it feels when you're too busy to play with me." They came back sharper each time, like the edge of a blade I couldn't stop running my fingers over. We pulled into the school's drop-off lane. Parents were getting out of cars, helping kids with backpacks, giving quick hugs. Emily unbuckled her seatbelt, picked up her bag, and paused for a moment before opening the door. "Bye, Daddy," she said softly, her eyes still on the door handle. "Bye, kiddo," I managed. My voice sounded smaller than I expected. She stepped out, shut the door gently, and walked toward the entrance without looking back. I sat there for a few seconds, watching her join the stream of children heading inside. And for the first time in a long time, I didn't just feel like a man on his way to work. I felt like a man standing on the edge of losing something far more important. By the time I pulled out of the school parking lot, the streets were alive with the rush of morning traffic. Cars lined up at intersections, impatient horns bleating in short bursts, cyclists weaving carefully between lanes, and pedestrians bundled in scarves, crossing against the light. But I barely noticed any of it. I drove the same route I always did, but it felt mechanical, like my body was doing it without my brain. My hands gripped the steering wheel, but my mind was still back in the kitchen, watching Emily hold up that drawing. I could still see the bright blue sky she'd scribbled, the oversized smile on her own face, and my tiny figure off to the side, almost like an afterthought. I could still hear the casual, almost gentle way she'd said it, because that's how it feels when you're too busy to play with me. By the time I reached the office parking lot, I had a knot in my stomach. Not the kind you get from nerves about a presentation or a meeting, but the heavier kind, the kind that makes you feel like something inside you is out of place. I walked into the building, swiped my badge, and headed toward my desk. The office smelled faintly of burnt coffee and printer toner, and the air had that recycled chill from the ventilation system that made you want to keep your jacket on. As I sat down and opened my laptop, my inbox flooded with emails. The subject lines were a blur of words like deadline, follow-up, urgent. Normally, I'd roll my shoulders, take a deep breath, and start ticking things off one by one. But today, my fingers just hovered over the keyboard. In the middle of a meeting, while my manager was talking about quarterly targets and new client acquisition strategies, I found myself doodling on the corner of my notepad. Without thinking, I was sketching stick figures, 3 of them, and every time I drew myself smaller than the other 2. I stared at the little drawing and realized this wasn't just about one morning. It was about years of telling myself I was doing everything for my family while slowly disappearing from the moments that actually mattered to them. At around 3 p.m., while everyone else was wrapping up reports, I opened the photo gallery on my phone. I started scrolling back through the last 6 months. There were plenty of pictures of Emily, smiling at the park, holding her artwork at school, blowing out candles on her birthday cake. But in almost all of them, I wasn't there. Not because I didn't want to be, but because I'd been at the office, or on a business trip, or in another room, telling myself I'd join in after I finished something important. I thought about something I'd once read, that someday all your child will have left of you are the memories you made together. And if you're not careful, you might leave them with more empty space than moments worth remembering. By 4:15, I made up my mind. I closed my laptop, stood up, and told my manager I'd be heading out early. He gave me a look, the kind of raised eyebrow glance that silently asks, "Everything okay?" I just nodded and said, "Yeah, everything's fine. I just have somewhere important to be." And for the first time in a long time, I wasn't talking about work. The late afternoon sun was just beginning to sink when I pulled out of the office parking lot. It hung low in the sky, spilling a golden haze across the tops of buildings and making the windshield glow in a way that almost felt theatrical, like the universe itself had decided this was the day something needed to change. Normally, at this hour, I'd still be buried in my desk chair, wrapping up calls and pushing through the tail end of my to-do list. But today, I was on the road, heading toward Emily's school. Traffic was steady, but not bad. I noticed things I usually overlooked, the way the wind was teasing the last few stubborn leaves, still clinging to the branches, the way long shadows from street lamps were stretching further than they had a week ago. For the first time in months, I wasn't thinking about unread emails or tomorrow's meeting agenda. I was thinking about the look on Emily's face when I'd left her that morning. When I reached the school, the parking lot was dotted with waiting cars. Parents leaned on their hoods, chatting, or stayed tucked inside their vehicles, scrolling through their phones. I pulled into a spot with a clear view of the front doors and turned off the engine. Sitting there, I realized I hadn't been the one to pick her up from school in weeks, maybe months. It was always her mom or the neighbor on days when we were both tied up. I'd been telling myself she didn't notice, but now I wasn't so sure. At exactly 3:30, the door swung open and a stream of kids poured out, backpacks bouncing, voices rising in a wave of chatter and laughter. I scanned the crowd for her familiar figure, and then I saw her. Emily stepped out slowly, clutching the straps of her backpack, looking around like she was checking for the usual pickup routine. When her eyes landed on me in the car, something happened. Her expression shifted from surprise to wide-eyed disbelief, and then to a smile that seemed to start in her eyes before it reached her mouth. She broke into a run, ponytail swinging, and when she yanked open the car door, the first thing she said was, "Daddy, what are you doing here?" I grinned. "Thought I'd surprise you. How about we grab some ice cream before dinner?" Her eyes widened even more. "Before dinner?" She said it like I'd just suggested we fly to the moon. "Yep," I said, keeping my tone light. "Some rules are meant to be broken." She laughed, that unguarded, bubbling kind of laugh kids have when they think the whole world just tilted in their favor. She buckled herself in, still smiling, and as I pulled away from the curb, I realized something that made my throat tighten. She didn't need an explanation for why I was there. She didn't ask if something was wrong at work. She just accepted the moment for what it was, time with her dad. The ice cream shop sat on the corner of a quiet street just a few blocks from Emily's school, kind of place that had been there for years, unchanged by the passing of time. The red and white striped awning out front was a little faded from the sun, and the hand-painted sign above the door had a tiny chip in one corner, but that was part of its charm. I parked right in front and cut the engine. As soon as Emily stepped out of the car, she tilted her head back, inhaling deeply as though she could already smell the waffle cones baking inside. The little brass bell above the door jingled when we walked in. The air was warmer inside, heavy with the sweet scent of sugar, vanilla, and melted chocolate. Behind the counter, a teenage boy wearing a paper hat and a slightly crooked name tag gave us a cheerful nod. Emily went straight to the glass display, pressing her hands against it, eyes scanning the colorful rows of ice cream tubs. "Can I try the cotton candy flavor?" she asked, already pointing at a swirl of pink and blue. "Of course," I said, "and get whatever you want after that. Today's a special day." She turned to me, grinning. "Why is it special?" I shrugged, smiling. "Because we decided it is." The boy behind the counter handed her a tiny spoonful. She tasted it, eyes closing in exaggerated bliss. "This is the best thing I've ever had," she declared. "Then that's what you're getting," I said. I ordered a scoop of pistachio for myself, my favorite since I was a kid, and we carried our cones to a little table by the window. Outside, people strolled by in light jackets, some walking dogs, others carrying shopping bags. Inside, the only sounds were the low hum of the freezer and the occasional clink of a spoon against a bowl. Emily took a big bite, then leaned back in her chair. "You never pick me up from school," she said. She wasn't accusing me, just stating a fact, like she had that morning. I took a slow breath. "I know," I admitted, "and I should. I've been too busy." She licked a streak of melted ice cream from her hand. "But you're here now." That simple sentence, so matter-of-fact, so accepting, hit me harder than any lecture ever could. She wasn't asking me to explain or to make promises. She was just acknowledging the moment we were in. I leaned forward. "I'm going to try to be here more. Not just here," I gestured around the table, "but here, with you, when you want to show me something, or tell me something, or just..." Saturday morning came with a pale, golden light spilling through the curtains and the faint smell of coffee drifting in from the kitchen. Normally my Saturdays started slow, coffee in hand, laptop open, telling myself I'd just catch up on a few things before really starting the day. But this Saturday, I had a different agenda. I'd woken up early, partly because of the sunlight, and partly because I was restless with anticipation. Emily had made me promise, actually made me shake hands on it, that we'd build her Lego set together this weekend. Not just any Lego set, either. This one had been sitting on the shelf in her room for months, a Christmas gift from her aunt, still sealed in its bright, glossy box. By the time I poured my first cup of coffee, I could already hear her small footsteps upstairs. They came quick, like she was running from room to room, getting herself ready. A moment later, she appeared at the kitchen doorway, hair sticking out at odd angles, eyes bright with excitement. "You ready?" she asked, skipping the good morning entirely. I laughed. "Let me finish this coffee, and then yes, I'm ready." She disappeared again and came back holding the box like it was some kind of treasure chest. It was big, covered in pictures of the finished set, which looked like an elaborate medieval castle, complete with turrets, a drawbridge, and tiny plastic knights. We cleared the living room coffee table, spreading out the instruction booklet, and dozens of little plastic bags filled with bricks of every shape and color. The sunlight poured across the table, making the pieces glint like jewels. As we started building, Emily insisted on being the piece finder while I handled the trickier connections. But very quickly, I realized she didn't need as much help as she thought. She was patient, methodical, and determined, sorting through pieces with furrowed brows until she found the exact one we needed. At one point, as she snapped a wall section into place, she said, "This is way more fun than doing it alone." "Yeah?" I asked, glancing at her. She nodded. "Because then we can talk while we build." It wasn't a complicated statement, but it hit me the same way her words in the kitchen had days earlier. This right here was what I'd been missing. Not just doing things with her, but being with her in the small, ordinary moments. We worked for hours, breaking only to grab snacks and laugh when the cat tried to steal a Lego knight and make a break for it. Piece by piece, the castle took shape, And with each step, I felt something inside me shifting, like I was slowly reclaiming the role I should have been playing all along. When we finally placed the last flag on the highest turret, Emily sat back and grinned. "We make a good team," she said. I looked at her, really looked, and realized how quickly she was growing. 8 years old now, and in what would feel like no time at all, she'd be in high school. The Monday after our Lego building marathon felt different before it even began. I woke up at my usual time, but instead of rolling over and mentally scrolling through my workday checklist, I lay there for a few minutes, just listening to the house. The early hum of the heater, the faint clatter of dishes in the kitchen, my wife moving about, probably making breakfast, and somewhere upstairs, the muffled sound of Emily's footsteps, moving with that half-awake shuffle she had when she hadn't quite let go of sleep yet. I'd been in this house for years, but I realized I rarely paid attention to these little morning sounds. Most days, I'd be checking my phone before I even set foot on the floor, eyes already glued to glowing screens, and my mind already someplace else. Not today. When I walked into the kitchen, Emily was sitting at the table, still in her pajamas, nibbling on toast and working on another drawing. This time, without thinking, I sat down across from her. No laptop, no phone, just my coffee in one hand and my attention in the other. "What are you drawing today?" I asked, leaning forward so I could see the page. She turned it toward me, smiling. This one had the three of us again, her mom, me, and her. But now we were all the same height. My figure wasn't small or pushed to the side. I was right there in the middle, holding both their hands. I didn't say anything right away, but I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the coffee. Over the next week, I made small changes that seemed almost insignificant on the surface, but carried weight in ways I hadn't expected. I started leaving the office on time, no matter how many urgent tasks were still open. I put my phone in a drawer during dinner when Emily wanted to show me something, a drawing, a silly dance, a rock she found that she swore was shaped like a heart. I stopped what I was doing and gave her my full attention. The surprising thing, work didn't fall apart. The email still got answered. The project still moved forward. But the heaviness I'd been carrying, that sense that life was always rushing past me, began to lighten, and Emily noticed. She started telling me more about her day without me having to ask. She'd linger a little longer after school drop-off, give me an extra hug before heading inside. It wasn't just about doing things with her. It was about being present enough for her to feel I was really there. And somewhere deep down, I realized this wasn't just changing her life, it was changing mine. It's funny how the smallest moments can plant themselves in your life and quietly grow roots you never expected. It had been a few weeks since that Thursday morning. The drawing, the ice cream, the Lego castle. On the surface, life looked the same. I still went to work, still had meetings, still dealt with deadlines, but underneath, my priorities had shifted in ways I could feel every single day. One evening, I was in the kitchen making tea when I heard Emily laughing from the living room. Not just a giggle, the full, unrestrained kind of laugh that starts deep in the belly and works its way up until it bursts out. It made me pause mid-step. I peeked in and saw her sprawled across the couch, showing our cat a picture she'd drawn, as if he might have an opinion on it. She glanced up, caught me watching, and patted the spot next to her. I sat down, and she slid the paper toward me. This time, it wasn't a picture of the three of us. It was a drawing of a park, with trees, a picnic blanket, and little stick figures lying on the grass. She'd labeled it at the top, "Me and Daddy's Saturday." "Is this for next weekend?" I asked. She shook her head. "It's for any weekend, or any day we want." That simple statement landed harder than she probably knew, because that's the thing about kids. They don't talk in the language of someday, or when I have time. They talk in now. In that moment, I realized Emily hadn't just been teaching me about spending time with her. She'd been teaching me about how I was living my life. I'd been postponing too much, Not just with her, with friends, with hobbies, with moments I told myself I'd get around to once work calmed down. But work never truly calms down. Life doesn't wait politely until your calendar is clear. And that's when it hit me. The lesson she gave me wasn't just be there for your child. It was be there for your life, because someday I'll be looking back, and the only thing that will matter, the only thing will be the memories I chose to make instead of the tasks I chose to prioritize. It's been months since that morning in the kitchen when Emily held up her drawing and, without even realizing it, changed the way I see my life. I still have that picture. I keep it tucked inside the notebook I use at work, the one that goes with me into every meeting, not because I need to look at it every day, but because on the days when I'm tempted to slip back into my old habits, it's there, a quiet reminder of what really matters. I've learned something important, something I wish I'd understood years earlier. We think our kids need us to be perfect providers, to have all the answers, to be the strong, dependable rock they can always lean on. But more than anything, they need us to be present, to look up from our screens, to say yes when they ask us to join them, to notice the small things they care about. And here's the truth. It's not just them who benefit. You do too. Because when you're truly present, life feels fuller. You laugh more, you remember more, and you stop feeling like time is slipping through your fingers without you ever really holding it. If there's one thing I want you to take from this story, it's this. Don't wait. Don't wait until the weekend. Don't wait until work slows down. Don't wait until you're less tired or less busy. The people you love, your kids, your spouse, your parents, your friends, they need you now, and you need them now too. That Thursday morning could have been just another blur in a long string of busy days, but because of one small, honest sentence from an 8-year-old girl with a purple crayon, it became the day I decided to change. And if you've been waiting for a sign to change something in your own life, maybe this is it. Before you go, I'd love to hear from you. Has a child ever said something that shifted your perspective? Have you had a moment where you realized you needed to slow down, to be more present? Share it in the comments. I promise I'll read every single one. And if you connected with this story, hit that subscribe button, ring the notification bell, and join me next time. Because the truth is, these stories aren't just mine. They're ours.